Hello, this is John Nix. I'm professor of voice and voice pedagogy at the music department at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And this is a presentation that I frequently do about SOVTs, semi-occluded vocal tract postures. And this has appeared as an article in the Journal of Singing, and this presentation is really just to kind of go along with that article and to give readers and listeners ideas about how to use these very valuable tools in their studios. Many singing teachers, voice therapists, and acting voice teachers employ the semi-occluded vocal tract postures in their teaching. But what is an SOVT? So it's any one of these postures where the mouth is more or less closed, hence semi-occluded, not completely stopped because we wouldn't get a whole lot of sound that way. So we have several different classes of these, and we're going to be going through these here over the next couple of minutes as we go through the next couple of slides. So the semi-occluded, or as they're often also called, flow-resistant postures, are an integral part of what Arthur Lesak and Kitty Verdolini and Ingo Titze and others have referred to as resonant voice training. And these postures can be divided into three basic types, which you can see here on the slide. And we're going to be looking at these in detail then over the next couple of slides. So the first type is where postures where the semi-occlusion remains consistent over time. So singing vowels into a straw or a tube. And then you can do all sorts of different vowels and different kinds of glissandi and so on. The diameter of the tube is much more critical until you get to some very, very long tubes. The diameter is much more critical than the length of the tube, according to Ingo Titze. Next would be the sustained phonation of voiced fricative consonants, V, Z, J, and Th. So, as an example, there I'm sustaining phonation on the V posture. Sustained phonation of the nasal consonants, such as M, N, and NG, and you can also combine the M with chewing for a hum chew, or skating as some people might call it, and you can glissando or use these on a fixed pitch. So for example, the humming and chewing at the same time, you get a little oscillation there in the sound. This is something that's very hardwired into us. I recall seeing my son at less than 12 hours old nursing, and he was humming while he nursed, and so his mouth was moving, and he was doing that humming sound at the same time. Finally, Burton Coffin's standing wave, or the open mouth hum, where you are singing a vowel into your hand, so it's not just an ordinary nasal, but you can actually do different vowel shapes. So for example, I'm going to do the vowel sequence E, A, A, O, U. My hand is sealing my mouth opening while I do the different vowels. Okay? Moving on. Postures where the occlusion is oscillatory. So, for instance, the lip buzz. The raspberry, which combines the flapping lips that you have of the lip buzz with a tongue extension. The rolled R. And one other, which is singing into a straw, which is then immersed in water. This has been used a lot in voice therapy in Scandinavian countries in particular. And Dr. Marco Guzman in Chile has done some research on this with what's called lax vox, a straw going down into water. All right. Next, the postures where the semi-occlusion or occlusion is very transitory. For instance, the semi-vowels y and w. Ya, 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 wa, wa, wa. And then things like the voiced plosive consonants. B, g, d. And so then those, of course, can be used as pilots into vowels. Booty, 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 boo. Now, I apologize for a very busy slide. A lot of important information here. There are a number of reasons why these postures have been so widely used. Potential physiological and acoustical benefits of these semi-occluded vocalizing postures include a high ratio of vocal output to vocal fold vibration amplitude. So these postures tend to encourage the vocal folds to shut off the airflow very quickly each vibration cycle. And this rapid shutting off of the flow generates strong higher frequencies. And the presence of these strong high frequencies in the spectrum is a critical element in the development of a ringing sound in the singing voice that can be heard over an orchestra. Moreover, these postures help singers achieve this rapid shutting off of the flow with a relatively low vocal fold vibration amplitude. And the result is more bang, that is, an improved acoustical output in a critical frequency area for less bucks, low effort, and thus reduced risk of tissue damage. Some semi-occluded postures may encourage a narrowing of the outlet of the larynx, which may aid in the production of the singer's formant cluster. It's a peak in the spectrum around 2700 to 3200 hertz, where strong high frequencies are present in the sound generated by the vocal folds. We get a clustering of the third, fourth, and fifth formants. Improved breath management. A singer or speaker can engage greater thoracic or abdominal support without using oppressed phonation, because the positive pressures above the vocal folds, and then you have the positive pressure, of course, coming up from the lungs, the vocal folds being in between, you have less likelihood of oppressing. Lowered phonation threshold pressure. The positive pressures above the glottis lower the pressure needed to initiate and sustain phonation. Head voice or facial or mask sensations are encouraged. This may be the most immediately tangible aspect of these postures in voice training, and it's due not only to the sympathetic vibration of the tissues and sinuses of the face and the skull, but also to a coupling of the vibration of the upper surface of the vocal folds with acoustical pressures above the glottis. Finally, a higher ratio of TA muscle activation to CT muscle activation during and after the use of the semi-occluded postures. This is similar to what has been found when contrasting covered singing, that is, thinking, an operatic voice in the upper register, with open singing, thinking maybe, the popular sound. From a voice training perspective, some of the practical benefits of the semi-occluded postures include sensations of increased or at least a more steady respiratory support. The downstream resistance gives the singer's respiratory system something to work against. One thing I will like to do perhaps with students is I'll have them put a hand on their abdominal wall and feel while they do a lip buzz or a hum, or maybe a voiced fricative. I personally do not advocate the up and in or down and out kind of activity. I find I do best and my students do best when things are kind of balanced between the two, neither extreme. And I find the semi-occluded postures help me and my students do that. Next, sensations of vibration in the orofacial area, particularly while doing, say, the voiced fricatives, the nasals, the lip buzz, the raspberry, and the rolled R. So, for example, you can do a Z, zzz, and due to the movement of the tongue up against the back of the teeth there at the alveolar ridge, you get a nice vibratory sensation very far forward in the mouth. Take also, for an example, an N, where your tongue is in very much the same position. Raspberry. You've got the vibration of the lips as they're surrounding the tongue. And for students, I will often have them put their hands lightly on their cheeks where they can also feel that the tissue is moving. Another benefit, release of habitual tensions in the tongue, the lips, and the jaw, particularly while doing the oscillatory and transitory semi-occluded postures. So again, the lip bubble or lip buzz, where the lips are sent into motion. The raspberry, where the tongue is extended and the lips are also loose to flap. The rolled R, where the tip of the tongue is vibrating. And I'll bring that oscillation to the attention of my students and attend to the freedom that may be engendered by that activity. One of the best things that they are for, I think, is just release of inhibitions. Doing a number of these postures require a singer to be more extroverted and to do something that looks kind of ridiculous, singing with flapping lips. I'm reminded of a personal anecdote. When I first began to study with the late Barbara Doscher, she was interested in me learning how to do the raspberry, and at the time I had a lot of jaw and tongue tension and I could not do it. And my wife was sitting in on my voice lesson, and Barbara looked at me and she said, "How long have you been married?" And I said, "Oh, about 6 months." And my wife kind of laughed, and Barbara said, "Well, in about 4 or 5 years, she's going to say something that you think is really kind of smarty-pantsy, and you're going to be very glad that I have taught you how to do this raspberry." At any rate, that certainly goaded me into practicing it, and I am now a very accomplished raspberrier. Another benefit of the semi-occluded postures in teaching singing: elevation of the soft palate. The positive oral pressures found in many of these cannot be easily generated without the palate being elevated. Now, this is not true, of course, of the nasals, but the voiced plosives and the raspberry, the lip bubble, all of those require a positive oral pressure, and it's that raising and sealing of the velopharyngeal opening that enables us to do those things. So, fronting the tongue. So the voiced fricative Z, the nasal continuant N, the raspberry, the rolled R, the Y glide, and the voiced plosive D all front the tongue. Those can be used as pilots to assist vowels, especially back vowels, which perhaps in some singers may be more back than they need to be, shall we say. And so, for instance, za, 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 where the Z, having to articulate the Z, reminds the singer's tongue to come forward. Using the N, no, 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 again, without me as a teacher having to say, okay, remember to keep your tongue forward. Rather, I give them the task that involves articulating a particular consonant that moves the tongue in the desired position, and then the student is focused on that rather than thinking about the mechanics of the action. The raspberry often is very effective, where you use it as a lead in, or the rolled R, ra, or the y glide, yo, or the voiced plosive D, da, 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 da. Now, there are a number of possible uses of the semi-occluded postures in singing pedagogy. Here are several examples or suggestions that I've come up with over the years. Diagnostic with a new student. I'll have the student, I'll ask them to do a raspberry. I'll ask them to do a lip buzz. If necessary, I'll start with unvoiced first and then voiced. Having difficulty with either posture can be an indication of some unsteadiness in the airstream. Only a steady optimal flow and sufficient pressure to drive the additional tissue into vibration will work. Trouble can also indicate possible tensions in the facial area and the tongue. Using an unvoiced raspberry to voiced raspberry and then going back to unvoiced, such as I'm about to do here. So you start unvoiced and then add voicing while continuing the raspberry and then unvoice again, can help reveal whether the tongue engages unnecessarily at voice onset or at offset. Now you might ask, how do you teach someone to lip bubble who has never done so? One thing I might start with is something familiar, so saying blah. So blah, 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 and you gradually get them to linger longer on the b articulation. Sometimes a light touch on the corners of the mouth or some gentle massage in the molar area can help maintain that freedom in the lip area in people who have kind of tight embouchure. The humming and chewing might also be a good place to start. One final one is, of course, using a finger to help get the lip flap started. So you have the person and you just have them kind of and then by using your finger faster then they can articulate the you get the lips to start to vibrate a little more freely. Educational things that I use the SOVTs for. Obviously, I teach a lot of pedagogy classes, and I find the following helpful regarding dispelling unusual misconceptions people may have about voice production that are not grounded in physiological reality. They will talk about having particular resonators in unusual parts of their body, or placement in their sinuses. Well, sensations in the face are, of course, a wonderful thing, but they are a result, not a cause, of a particular coordination of the whole vocal system. And for those that are convinced that something other than the vocal tract and perhaps the nasal cavity contributes to the sound we hear, I'll simply have them hum, and then I'll say, all right, now I want you to start and then pinch your nostrils closed. And very quickly the sound comes to an end, because if it doesn't have an opening to the outside world, it isn't contributing to the sound that we hear. Warm down. I find the gentle nature of hum chewing, lip buzzing, raspberries, singing through a straw, very effective in facilitating cool down after a performance, a long practice session, or a lesson. This is particularly important for singers who sing in more athletic-oriented styles, demanding CCM, operatic or music theater singing. Often I'll encourage doing several cycles through kind of a circuit training set of the four I just mentioned. So I might have suggest the student do on a lip buzz, on a raspberry, humming and chewing, and then a glissando into a straw. Unfortunately, I don't have a straw handy right now as I'm doing this presentation. Respiratory awareness. The downstream resistance these postures provide can help singers get a better sense of breath energy connection. Using a voiced fricative, a nasal, or a straw is good for establishing a more gentle connection, especially for those who are kind of hyperfunctional, while using the lip buzz or raspberry, both of which involve putting more tissue into motion with the airstream, I find are best for the person who needs to take a little more assertive approach to their singing. So the pushers benefit from learning how to do the more gentle postures, and the peepers, the ones who tend to undersing, benefit from learning how to do the more extroverted ones. For singers who struggle to keep the airstream going on a difficult musical passage, I'll advocate doing the phrase on a lip buzz or a raspberry and then singing it, and we alternate until the transfer is secure. For instance, I have a graduate soprano, and she's working on O luce di quest'anima, and it's rather disjunct, and so I have her singing some of the more disjunct passages first on a lip bubble, and then I'll have her sing it on the words, O luce di quest'anima, and we'll go back and forth and gradually wean her off using the lip bubble. I would make sure that the breath energy is consistent in the singing as it was in the semi-occluded posture. Some more examples of how I like to use the SOVTs. Addressing hard onsets and punched releases. Often I'll use an unvoiced to voiced to unvoiced semi-occluded pattern with students who have unhealthy onset or release habits. For instance, and encouraging them to feel a little release of air, so that there's a little air flowing down the nose on an H. And then they start phonating as the flow is already going. You can also do this with fricatives, so doing from a sh to a zh to a sh, sh, or zzz. Or, so that was an S to a Z. Of course, my favorites are doing the raspberry, or, that was the lip bubbles, excuse me, or the raspberry. And you get to where the singer can initiate phonation and release without there being any interruption in the airstream in the flapping of the lips and the movement of the tongue. Working with singers who I've had referred to me by a laryngologist. Well, my colleagues Blake Simpson and Jill Green and Laura Dominguez and Rachel Spear at the South Texas Voice Center here in San Antonio often refer singers to me for singing lessons while they are either still in therapy or they've been released from therapy, and they'll call me in to do some transfer work into singing voice, particularly if these are people who singing is, part of their livelihood. And one thing I'll frequently do to facilitate better function is to do gentle agility-oriented exercises while using the semi-occluded postures. The stretch and release of agility-oriented patterns where you're doing wide intervallic change in a rapid fashion, and the vocal folds are stretching and releasing and stretching, releasing, can be very helpful in terms of keeping that tissue supple, especially, say this person is post-surgical or something like that, and they've been released from speech voice therapy, but they really need that transfer into their singing where they're using more and more of their frequency range. So, for instance, maybe starting with doing work on a straw and humming and chewing, and then gradually working up to the more assertive patterns, the raspberry or the lip bubble. I might have the singer do, for instance, I'll just hum this. So again, the pattern, by having wider and wider intervals, we're getting some gentle stretch and release of the vocal fold tissue, while the semi-occluded posture reduces impact forces and provides some beneficial sensations for the singer to remember and associate with easy vocalization. And the alternation in direction that I just did there, descending and then ascending, helps the singer acquire a better balance of function intrinsically. And the variable nature of the practicing, where they're doing one direction and doing another, and we can do it on different SOVTs, again taps into what we know about motor learning to better aid better retention and transfer of skills. Here are some other similar patterns. I'll lip bubble them here. And then we do the other direction. Also, you can do a V. Put your finger very lightly up against the lips. It's kind of the paper kazoo feeling. Okay, and doing again these wide intervals and rapidly. And then ascending. And finally, going up to an octave. So starting at the higher frequency and coming down, and then we could do the same thing going back up. Now, you can also combine some of these patterns with some movement. Say, for example, that first pattern that we did, I'm going to demonstrate it here on a lip bubble and turning my head at the same time. Trust me, I am actually doing it, even though you may not be able to hear that out in Facebook world or wherever you're going to be seeing this video. So I'm just gently turning my head right to left, right to left. You could do trunk twists, anything that is, again, aiding in freedom and smooth coordination of muscle function. I think we're helping our singers find that balance of energy and freedom by pairing up movement with phonation like that. Now, once a singer has achieved easy function on the semi-occluded postures, the next step is to use them as pilots into a vocalese or a musical phrase. And my method of doing so is to alternate trials with and without the pilot posture to assist in the transfer of vocal production and sensation from the semi-occluded pilot posture to the sung portion. And then we gradually wean the singer off of using that pilot semi-occluded exercise entirely. So, for example, I might have the student just lip bubble a pattern, just a 5-note pattern down, and then buzz for a moment just on the first note, and then go into a vocalese on that same pattern. So, for instance, then I would ask them to do it without the initial buzz. And then we put the buzz back in. Modulate down. Leaving the buzz out. So we're going from a semi-occluded posture that varies over time, the lip buzz, and using that as a pilot into a transitory occluded posture, the glide. Then alternate using the buzz and not using it to assist in the transfer. Might try this also with a phrase from a song. Henry Purcell's "I'll Sail Upon the Dog Star" has a lot of florid stuff, and I might use Burton Coffin's standing wave posture. At the very end, there's a line, "and whether I'm a roaring boy." And so the vowel in the word "and," is either an or an "a," depending on how you pronounce it. So doing that "a" vowel into my hand, an occluded posture, and then releasing into the phrase, such as, "and whether I'm a roaring boy." And then, to aid in transfer, I'd alternate trials with and without the standing wave posture, and then gradually wean off having to use it at all. To promote light mechanism in the upper bridge, notice I didn't say break, I said bridge, of a male voice, or the lower bridge of a female voice, I might use semi-occluded postures using a straw to kind of siren through there, and then use the straw as a lead into some closed vowel work, and then without the straw at all. And again, it's that idea of using the semi-occluded all the time, and then the semi-occluded just as a pilot, and then weaning off, even using it as a pilot. When using the semi-occluded postures as pilots into a vocalese or phrase, they need not be used on a static pitch. You could do so you do a moving pattern with the semi-occluded posture, and then you go into a moving vocalese. Here, this semi-occluded posture kind of serves as a running start respiratory-wise for the singer, so that they don't under or over sing. And legato is hopefully assisted through a steady airflow being established at the very start, and the occluded posture and the initial descending direction help keep the singer from being too weighty. Some caveats as we kind of wrap it up here. Even though from a theoretical standpoint it may be most beneficial to start with the most occluded postures and go towards those which are most vowel-like, in the voice studio one must often start with the postures that are most familiar to the student, which may only be the glides, the semivowels, and the plosives and the nasals, things that they encounter in language, and gradually move towards employing the more flow-resistant postures, especially the narrow straws, which are probably the most occluded. It's important also to remember that the semi-occluded postures are just a means to an end, and they're not a cure-all for every problem. They shouldn't be used as a crutch, but rather as one of many tools in your toolbox that you use sparingly and then put back in the toolbox because the singer you're working with doesn't need that prompt or thing to unlock them anymore. They've learned the new behavior that you want. And finally, I strongly recommend that singers and teachers rotate the semi-occluded postures that they use on a regular basis. Don't get in a rut of always using a hum, or always using a lip trill, or always using the semivowels. Rotate them around. Different technical problems may benefit from different ones. As we said earlier, some of the more extroverted ones help people who need a little more forthright approach to their singing, while people who tend to err on the side of pushing can benefit from using some of the more gentle postures. So it's really a matter of using your judgment as to what's going to be the best tool for the situation. And if you have questions, my office phone number and email are there. Again, this is found, a lot of this information is found in a recent article in the Journal of Singing, Closing Your Mouth to Open Your Sound. And there are a lot of references included at the end of that article for the theory behind the use of the semi-occluded postures, trials that have been done either in the laboratory, computer simulations, you name it. And again, I'm happy to answer questions. Just contact me and I will write you back. And thank you for